Okay, before we get into today's video, I just want to mention two things. One, the first part of this video is going to be the standard review portion, and the second part is going to be a more off-the-cuff discussion of the game, where I go a bit deeper into certain aspects of it. And the second thing I want to mention before we start is that I'm going to keep all the footage as spoiler-free as possible. So any content you see will be from the first few hours or presented without any context. With that, let's get into the game. Cronos: The New Dawn is the latest game from Bloober Team, the guys that brought you things like Layers of Fear, the Blair Witch game, The Medium, and more recently, the brilliant Silent Hill 2 remake. So far, everything we've seen from this developer has been met with a middling to okay response from reviewers. Not counting the Silent Hill 2 remake, as some would argue that the stellar blueprint for that game had already been established, so claiming it was all Bloober would be inaccurate. But when it comes to Cronos, this would mark their first attempt at a modern action survival horror game. By that, I refer to the likes of the later Resident Evil games, the Dead Space series, the Evil Within series, and other titles like Alan Wake 2 and the underrated Alone in the Dark game. Typically, these titles' gameplay revolves around slow, third-person over-the-shoulder shooter action combined with a creepy and foreboding atmosphere, and to top it all off, a stingy resource system for added tension and dread factor. By these metrics, Cronos blows all the core survival horror principles out the water. In terms of creating an oppressive gameplay loop that has you limping from encounter to encounter by the skin of your teeth, Cronos, in my opinion, has struck that balance brilliantly. Which to me was an immediate cause of concern because I typically play these games on hard difficulty. Most people do not, and there is no option in game to change that. So I feel that many players might jump off from the punishing resource management aspect alone. Couple that with the erratic weapon sway and slow fire rate of the starting weapons, now missing a shot feels extremely punishing, more so than any other similar game I've played in recent memory. Thankfully, as you progress, this will become much easier to manage. As you unlock more inventory slots, upgrade your weapon's damage and fire rate, you'll find dealing with enemies eventually become a fun and satisfying chore. Apart from your actual in-hand weapons, you'll find another huge part of the combat loop involves fire. Cronos seems to have taken a lot of inspiration from the 1982 movie The Thing. Beyond the obvious comparison between the movie and the monsters in this game, there's also this heavy-handed theme of kill it with fire that runs through the whole game. Fire weakens and stuns the enemies, or orphans as they refer to in this game. As a traveler, you very early on in the game gain access to two means of dealing fire damage. One in the form of a torch that blasts fire all around you, engulfing the surrounding area in flames, and also a pyre that works as a proximity mine with the same effect. On top of all that, fuel canisters are rather generously peppered all around the game. While at first glance, all this talk about fire might seem a bit overblown, but it plays directly into a core mechanic of the game, and I'm sure you've seen the marketing by now. Don't let them merge is what we're constantly reminded. Fire helps solve this issue. By burning the bodies of these monsters, we can ensure they have nothing to merge with. This merge mechanic is the biggest factor separating Cronos from its survival horror contemporaries. You see, when these orphans are allowed to merge, they get bigger and stronger, meaning it's going to cost you a lot more resources to take them down. So it is in your best interest to be as efficient as possible with your bullets and use those barrels and fuel canisters to strategically thin out the herd. Next up, level design. Levels were very carefully thought out and beautifully constructed. Every location you visit has a strong sense of identity, and almost every scene is picturesque in presentation. A lot of it owing to the dystopian sci-fi theme involving suspended buildings and futuristic tools contrasted against the late 20th century fictional Russian backdrop. And might I add, as mentioned in my previous video, the Christmas theme really helps set an eerily cheerful tone. But getting back to what I was saying about the levels, the game actually plays in a sort of linear fashion. I say sort of because you'll occasionally loop back onto your starting point, so in a sense you can say it's more of a hub type situation, but at the same time there's only ever one golden path to follow, with the occasional side path that rewards you with resources if you choose to follow it. This game is so clever about how they make full use of the space they're given, often rerouting the player to the starting point or safe room where they can replenish resources and save the game before venturing out again. this time through the shortcut you just unlocked to get here. This kind of level design is so rewarding to navigate because each loop around back to the safe room feels earned and always seems to come at just the right time. The one thing I could have done without though is the sections where the team went ham with these biomass covered corridors. There's just way too many of these sections, and by the halfway point through the game you're already over that queasy claustrophobic feeling they're trying to invoke, and are now just annoyed by how much they slow your pace when you just want to get cracking. Story. Now this is a bit of a tricky one. This has to be the most divisive aspect of the game. Before I give you my opinion, let me give you a quick rundown of the setup. You play as a time traveler, awoken at a seemingly unexpected moment in the future, and are tasked by the collective, a sort of disembodied entity, with carrying out your duty of picking up where the last traveler left off. For you, this means getting to a dive point, which are like rifts in time, to extract a human target from 1981. Supposedly, the target in question holds information relating to the world-ending event, simply known as the Change, and it's up to the travelers to piece together everything that happened in 1981 so they can hopefully stop the infestation from taking over in the future. That's the premise of the game, but things only get more complicated after that. And I want to leave this a bit open-ended in case some of you still want to play it. Now, I've played the game twice, and I actually adore the story, and it was a huge part of the driving force behind my second playthrough. That being said, I don't think it's presented in a way that's compelling enough for the average player. It can be very confusing to follow because of a lot of key information is only available in notes and recordings. And judging from the completion time of some of these reviews, I can tell they did not take the time to go over any optional backstory. And I don't judge these reviews because I believe a really good story can be told on the surface level as well as on a deeper level. So while I commend the team on writing an excellent story with a deep and incredibly fleshed out backstory, I also feel if they'd done a better job of telling it at a surface level, this game would have been lauded as an instant classic. But I have no doubt Cronos will garner its own little cult following. In my opinion, Bloober has already proven themselves with this game, and I personally hold them in high regard along with all my favorite survival horror developers, and I'm eagerly awaiting whatever they decide to put out next. Here's to hoping that Silent Hill remake is just as good as part 2. I give Cronos the New Dawn 9 out of 10. So first of all, thank you if you made it this far, and I just want to give you another slight warning here. There might be a little bit of spoilers, as I can't talk about some of these things without spoiling a few things, but I will try to keep major spoilers out of it. So with that, let's get on with the second portion. With that said, let's talk about the actual combat. So the first thing I want to note is that I played with a controller for like an hour, maybe an hour and a half of my playthrough, and it makes the game harder. I don't know how else to say it, but it feels harder just by default of using a controller. Aiming on this game feels very inaccurate, especially at the start before you get your upgrades. And I feel like a lot of the discussion around difficulty comes from the fact that most people are playing on controller. If you play this game on mouse and keyboard, it becomes so much easier to hit headshots, and it also becomes easier in terms of resource management because you're not wasting shots constantly. The way I see it, the developers definitely intended for the game to feel difficult to control, because that adds to the horror factor apparently, as evident by some games still using tank controls because it feels more difficult to control, I guess. But at the same time, they've given you so much power. As the traveler, you get like the Dead Space stomp and the hook. And for the first time ever, it actually does damage to the enemies, and at times you can often finish off an enemy by like just landing a single hit or two. But at the same time, I mentioned she plays like a tank. She's very slow to control, and I think it's perfectly paced for this kind of game because enemies are not exactly fast unless they're dashing at you, which is not often the case, but it does happen time to time. But for the most part, they are slow shuffling, but they hit really hard. So usually after a single hit, you're gonna have to take some kind of heal. You can probably go 2, maybe 3 hits before you're dead. I kind of went back to a Dead Space video, and I noticed that your character is way faster to control. But I guess you're also facing faster enemies in that game. But what I'm saying is, with this game, you have to be smarter about your positioning, as well as keeping an eye on the playing field, because you got to know where those fuel canisters are, and you got to know where to make the best use of them. So placing yourself in a strategically beneficial spot is always like in the back of your mind, and I like that. While we're on the topic of combat, I just want to point out that whenever you do or you perform a melee attack, the weapon in your hand switches to a knuckle buster, and you don't really see that in the game. And it would have been really cool if the animation like showed that better, because it happens so fast in the game that if you blink it, you'll miss it. But it's such a cool little detail, and I wish they like highlighted that a bit more, maybe with a slightly slower animation, but it's not really important. I just thought I'd mention that. Another thing I wanted to talk about is the fact that the game doesn't really throw any curveballs at you. I'm not talking about story, I'm talking about like in-game scenarios. Besides the monster jumping out of nowhere or falling down from the ceiling or bursting out from the biomass walls, they never do anything that catches you off guard. Like for example, the platforming segments where you magnetize boots, hop from one platform to another. There was an opportunity in there somewhere for you to get caught mid-jump from one magnetized platform to the next, and maybe like when you get halfway there, something just comes out of nowhere, it swipes you to a new section or another platform, and you have to fight that thing before you get back on track to where you were going. There's never any moments like that. Maybe what I'm talking about is like scripted sequences that breaks the game's logic in a sense. Like another example would be in Resident Evil, I believe it was 3, there's a point where you get to the safe room, and as far as the game's logic is concerned, Nemesis will never get into a safe room. But there's one point in the game where I think he actually comes into the safe room, and it just turns the game like on itself in terms of what is possible and what shouldn't happen. I wish there was a moment like that in this game, but I didn't see anything like that. In terms of the story though, I thought I knew exactly where it was going, but there is enough in there that catches you off guard, but still as confusing as ever the first time round. You really do have to play this game twice to understand the story at a deeper level. And just yesterday I was watching another video that added another layer to the whole story that I didn't really note or didn't really take note of. It's quite obviously rooted in political ideologies, but I don't really have an eye for that. Nor do I really care about politics, and I never really paid attention to like things like communism versus socialism and in history class. It never really piqued my interest, honestly. But they are quite heavy-handed in their themes regarding politics in this game. Specifically, like when you're talking to the collective, the stage is always bathed in red light. Plus, if you pay attention to the weapons the travelers are using, it looks pretty much like a hammer, and the other one is definitely a sickle. So I guess it was a bit on the nose, but I don't really have an eye for these things, and I didn't pick it up in my 2 playthroughs so far. But the stuff I really cared about in this game was how they told all these characters' stories. You could follow all these characters from when the outbreak starts to wherever it ended for them. Most of the time rather tragic endings for everyone. But I love how they placed little hints and little pieces detailing what was happening to these characters at any moment. And playing the game for the second time, knowing the fate of all these characters, it's really interesting to see how everything links up. And I've never been the type to get into the lore of games. Like, I played Elden Ring probably 3 times now, and I never really stopped once to ever look or pay attention to the lore. If I saw a cool weapon, that was it. It was a cool weapon. I didn't really care where it came from, who it belonged to. But in this game, it's the first time I've paid attention to lore. Mainly because I think it's rooted in realism. What I mean is that everybody's motivations and reasoning for the things they do was believable compared to, for example, something in Elden Ring where if a weapon was forged by a blacksmith that possessed some strange power that only he had, and he was the only one that could imbue this weapon with this specific power, That kind of stuff doesn't interest me because things can always just be made up and it doesn't have to make sense. As long as it's there, people can make a connection to it. And a lot of people enjoy that kind of thing, but not me. I like things that are grounded in realism, but are still interesting in a sense. And following these characters' stories in documents and recordings, that was the hook for me. Admittedly, the first time around, it was a bit overwhelming because they were just throwing names around, and as soon as like names are just being thrown around loosely, I tend to check out. But by the second playthrough, I wanted to see every piece of information I could to understand these characters and their motivations. The one thing I wish they'd done better was the actual cutscenes where you deal with some of these characters, and I feel like the animation versus the line delivery does not match up at most times. So at certain points when the characters are like having a heated conversations or trying to be expressive, it comes across a bit goofy in a sense, and I really wish Bloober done a better job of lining up those two things a bit better. Another thing I wanted to talk about is the inventory system, and I'm sure by now you've heard from nearly everyone about it. I just want to give you my 2 cents on it. So my opinion is that it is way too small at the start. Even though I understand what they're going for, they want to give you very little options so that you make a decision as to how you're going to make it through the next encounter. I kinda like it because it doesn't allow you to get comfortable with having too many bullets. At the same time, I feel it is extremely strict. Too strict in my opinion. Because at the start, you get 2 weapons very early on. The pistol and the shotgun. That's 2 slots out of the starting 6. Plus you gotta add handgun bullets into 1 slot, shotgun shells into the other. 4 out of the 6 slots. From the get-go. That's before adding anything else like healables, key items, and your fire weapons. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, you get a pyre and you get a torch, both of which use resources, meaning you can allocate 1 torch, which is the one that blasts fire around you. That takes up 1 slot. If you want to carry one of those proximity mines as well, that's another slot. And if you're carrying those 2 things and your 2 weapons, that's all your slots used. Not to mention, if you want to carry bolt cutters, which is a huge part in this game, because there are so many chains that you can cut throughout the whole game. It actually remained with me in my inventory from when I got it to the end of the game. So that was basically 5 slots in total because the 6th one was always taken up by the bolt cutters. Now you can put the bolt cutters away in your store box, but I find that if you've done that at any point, you would eventually get to a point where you need the bolt cutters and you would have to backtrack all the way just to pick it up and come back. Thankfully I avoided all that, but that also meant I had 1 less inventory slot at all times. So from the very start of the game, I spent all my upgrade materials on the inventory slots. And even still, by the end of the game, I feel like I was struggling for space. If I wanted to carry 3 weapons, that meant 3 slots including 3 additional other slots just for the ammo, which meant you had to think very carefully about how you want to venture into your next encounter. Now, while I do appreciate that extra layer of difficulty on top of this, I also feel like it discouraged me using or experimenting with weapons. Once I got my hands on the pistol and the shotgun, I never really needed any other weapon. The pistol always fulfilled that ranged option, and the shotgun always fulfilled that close range option. And I never really needed anything in between. Later on you would go on to find carbines as well, but I feel like a pistol would do the same job if you're accurate enough, and all it did was make your inventory smaller. So while I do like the fact that you're constrained in that sense, I also think they kind of shot themselves in the foot, because you're not really encouraged to try other weapons, especially weapons that are more wasteful with ammo, I should note. Because a carbine, for example, fires 3 bullets in one go, and that just feels wasteful when you're trying to be as conservative as possible with your resources. But that's about it. I want to thank you if you made it this far, and I look forward to actually doing more of these off-the-cuff discussions. I want to keep doing more of these videos because it's something I need to practice. I'm terrible at putting my thoughts in a concise and articulate manner, I should say. But the only way we're going to get better is if we keep doing it right. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.